When I was 6 years old, I had a bad accident in the playground. I fell off of a piece of climbing equipment for older children called monkey bars and struck my head. This resulted in my being hospitalized for a few days but fortunately left me with no permanent injury. However, after being released from the hospital, I began to suffer from two difficulties: occasional dizzy spells with loss of balance, and more serious to me, loss of control of wetting. These two problems lingered on, and the wetting became worse. I was wetting the bed sometimes 2 or 3 times a night and having many accidents during the day in my pants. My mother was losing her patience with me and was even more angry because I had been forbidden from using the monkey bars in the first place. She would scold me whenever I wet the bed or my pants, but I just couldn't control myself. I had ruined a mattress and my mother was doing laundry every day. I was a very sensitive boy and would cry whenever anyone scolded me. After this went on for nearly 2 weeks, my mother took me to the doctor in town to find out what was wrong with me. The doctor examined me and had me take some tests. She phoned my mother with the results and said that the dizziness should diminish over time by itself, but that in her opinion the wetting problem should be addressed because I had apparently lost my ability to control myself, whether it was psychological or not. Unbeknownst to me, she had told my mother that in the way some people have to be taught to speak after an accident, I would have to be trained to control myself like I was an infant again. She had added that it would not be practical for me to be sent to school, which began in a few days as it was the end of summer, but rather I should be potty trained, which would require a lot of attention and could take months. The doctor added that I should probably be put back in diapers to help with the training. My mother understood that this must be done, but she could not stay home with me as she had to work in the school cafeteria in a few days, as it was the only income we had. That night my mother spoke to my Aunt Jane, who lived several hours away, and asked her if she could take care of me for a while and deal with my wetting problem. My aunt said that she'd be glad to help, and told my mother to bring me to her house right away. The next day my mother put me in the car, telling me only that I would be staying with my aunt for a while. I remember thinking it odd that she hadn't packed any of my clothes for the trip. I asked her why, but she didn't answer. It was a long ride and we stopped several times to use the restrooms. However, when we were almost there, an urge to pee came over me and I told my mother to stop so I could pee. She said that there was no place to pull over and I should just hold it in as we were almost there. Unfortunately, before I knew what was happening, I peed all over myself and the car seat. My mother became furious and said we had been only 5 minutes from my aunt's house. I sat there crying as we pulled up to Aunt Jane's. I didn't want my aunt or my cousins to see me with my clothes all wet. However, my mother took hold of my hand and pulled me to the door. When my aunt answered the door, my mother told her that her little baby had just wet all over in the car and needed to be bathed and changed right away. Aunt Jane looked at me and giggled as she led us to the bathroom. The two women stripped off all my clothes, including my wet pants and underwear, and drew a bath for me. I was quite shy and was scared by this. I was bathed and then dried off and wrapped in a towel. Aunt Jane then led us to a room that had a lot of baby furniture and decorations in it and said that it used to be my cousin's baby room, but that I would be staying there now. I asked why but received no answer. My aunt lifted me onto a table and remarked about how tiny I was for my age, adding that she thought the clothes would fit me. My mother said she hoped so. The next thing I knew was that the women were wiping me down with baby oil and powder. They turned me over and did the other side. I whined that I didn't need that, but they just said to be quiet. Then I saw what appeared to be several diapers in my mother's hand, and she said something about me being a heavy wetter. At that point I knew what they had in mind and I protested vehemently, but they just ignored me as my mother went ahead and pinned the diapers on me. As I started crying again, my aunt held out a pair of pink baby panties with lacy ruffles on the seat and leg openings. I begged them not to make me wear these, but I was threatened with a spanking if I didn't be still. She slid them up my legs and over my diapers, and they remarked about how well they fit me. I was wailing heavily now, but the women just upset me further by laughing and talking to me with baby talk. Some anklets with ruffles were put on my feet as I continued weeping and pleading with them not to make me wear baby girls' clothes. I couldn't believe my shame as my aunt held out a frilly petticoat and short pink baby dress with lace and puffy sleeves that they were going to put me in next. I tried to stop them from making me wear these, and my mother became angry and turned me over and slapped me several times on my diapered bottom. It made more noise than hurt, but it reminded me I couldn't resist them. I sat there helplessly as they put the petticoat and dress on me. Some small Mary Jane shoes went on my feet. My aunt fastened some barrettes in my long hair. When they were finally finished, my mother exclaimed that my cousin Cindy's baby clothes fit me perfectly, and that was fortunate since they couldn't afford to buy me baby clothes of my own. My mother had donated my things to charity a while back. As I sat there feeling totally mortified, my mother carried me over to a mirror to show me how I looked like a pretty 2-year-old girl and to tease me further by calling me Susan instead of my real name. She explained that I would not be going to school, that I would be staying with my aunt for several months until I learned to control my wedding and my bad behavior. She went on that I would be treated as a baby girl and would not be climbing any monkey bars but instead would play with dolls to help calm me down. She added that I would do exactly as my aunt said or else Aunt Jane would spank me very hard. I tearfully agreed as there was nothing else I could do. My mother then carried me over to a playpen and sat me down inside. She told me to stay there quietly as she and Aunt Jane were going to have tea. Aunt Jane smiled and placed some dolls in the playpen for me. When the women left, I was feeling so ashamed and embarrassed I didn't know what to do. I decided to try to climb out of the playpen and find the clothes that I had worn to Aunt Jane's house. I was almost able to get over the railing, but I lost my balance and fell off with a thud. It hurt and I started crying. The women came running in and my mother was very angry that I tried to climb out of the playpen, but she thought I might be hurt so she stopped yelling and comforted me like a baby. They spoke baby talk to me and cuddled me. Aunt Jane told me to be a good girl and asked me if I wanted anything. I stopped sobbing and requested some soda pop. A short time later the women returned. My mother had a baby bottle in her hand and held it out to me. I told her I asked for some soda pop, not that. She replied, "Babies don't drink soda, Susie, they drink milk." I refused to drink it but my mother insisted, saying that I hadn't eaten any lunch and Aunt Jane went to a lot of trouble heating it for me. I screamed that I didn't want it but my mother became annoyed, picked me up from the playpen and carried me out to the living room, saying that since I was acting like a 2-year-old I would be treated like one. While my aunt giggled, my mother sat me on her lap and stuck the nipple in my mouth and ordered me to drink it all down or else I would be spanked. I felt so bad, but I had no choice, so I drank it. Just then my 2 cousins arrived home. Jennifer was 16 and Cindy was 6, but she was much bigger than me. Jennifer exclaimed, "What a pretty baby! Whose is she?" My aunt and my mother laughed and told her it was me, her cousin, and why I was dressed like a baby. My cousins laughed hysterically, but my aunt told them to get used to it as I would be staying with them for some time. The girls wanted to hold me and play with me but my mother said later as she was giving me my bottle now. The girls kept laughing and then got some lunch in the kitchen. After I finished the bottle, my mother burped me. She was pleased, and she and Aunt Jane praised me in baby talk. I was then returned to the playpen in the other room. I sat there for a few minutes and felt an urge to pee. I was really frightened and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, my diaper became soaked with warm pee-pee. I was much too embarrassed to call my mother or aunt, so I just sat there feeling very wet. A short time later, my cousins Jennifer and Cindy came in my room. They said that my mother told them to call me Baby Susie and that they could play with me. I told them I didn't want to play, but Jennifer reached in and picked me up out of the playpen. In doing so, she noticed that my diapers seemed heavy and asked me if I had wet myself. I was so embarrassed, I insisted that I had not. Jennifer said, "Let's see about that," and she pulled down my baby panties and felt the soggy diapers. She then told Cindy to tell my mother and their mom that Baby Susie needs changing. I felt so scared as my mother and aunt came in, but they were both smiling and cooing at me in baby talk. Jennifer and Cindy volunteered to change me, but I pleaded with my mother not to let them. My mother looked at my red face and giggled, asking me who I wanted to change my diapers. I pleaded, "You mommy." She said okay, and turning to the girls said, "Baby Susie is still a little shy, but maybe next time." She and my aunt were about to start, but I asked for the girls not to watch. So Aunt Jane thanked my cousins for helping and told them to go to the other room. My mother then put me on the table and she and my aunt removed my wet diapers, wiped me down, put on fresh lotion and powder, pinned on new diapers, and pulled a fresh pair of roughly baby panties on me. My mother then said, "Baby Susie looks very tired, she needs a nap." I told her that I wasn't tired, but my aunt chimed in that all babies need their naps. With that, my mother carried me over to a deep crib. I saw that it had sheets with circus animals printed on them and a satiny blanket with lace. She laid me inside and pulled the bars up into place, telling me that this is where I would be taking my naps and sleeping and not to ever try to climb out or I would get a spanking. They left the room and I laid there for a long time but couldn't fall asleep. My mother later returned and asked if I had napped. I said yes, and she took me out of the crib and carried me into the living room where Cindy was playing with a dollhouse. My mother put me next to her and told me to play. Cindy was very happy to have a new playmate and showed me her dolls and dollhouse. Shortly thereafter, it was dinner time. I was called into the dining room and waddled over to a chair. My Aunt Jane said, "Oh no honey, that's not a baby's chair." She then pointed to a high chair at the other side of the table and said, "There's where you will sit." I objected, but my mother told me to behave, picked me up, and sat me in the high chair, snapping the tray into place. My aunt put a bib on me so that I wouldn't get food on my dress. I looked very embarrassed sitting there and everyone stared at me and laughed. Cindy made note of the fact that my short dress didn't fully cover my panties, and everyone laughed even more. My aunt took a small portion of the food for me and cut it up very small, and offered to feed it to me. I wasn't cooperating well enough and my mother became annoyed and said, "It looks like she needs her bottle," and asked my aunt to get the one I used earlier. I was then given a bottle of apple juice and my aunt and mother spoon-fed me while talking to me in baby talk. I was so humiliated, but they forced me to drink and eat all the food. Jennifer and Cindy watched and giggled. Afterwards I was praised and given a cookie, and taken down from the high chair. Afterwards, I was sitting on the couch with Cindy and Jennifer watching TV while they tickled me and played with me. I felt very strange as my satiny dress and baby panties slid over the plastic slipcovers. Then my mother announced it was baby's bedtime. I was confused at first and thought she meant Cindy as it was only 7:30 p.m. and I went to bed later than that. My mother said, "No silly, you're the only infant here, and infants go to bed very early, so don't give me a hard time." With that, she carried me to my room. She undressed me to my baby pants and asked me if it needed to be changed. I said no, but she felt my bottom for a load and then stuck her finger under one of my leg openings to see if I was wet. She said I was still dry. My aunt handed her a frilly baby nightie for me to wear, and I held up my hands as it was pulled over me. I was then lowered into my crib and tucked in for the night with a teddy bear. Jennifer came in with a baby book and asked if she could read me a bed-by story. My mother said what a nice idea, and my cousin proceeded to read me some of Little Red Riding Hood. When finished, she kissed me and left the room. A short while later I couldn't help but soak my diapers again. I had lain there drenched for some time when my mother appeared in her nightgown. Without saying anything, she came over and put her finger under a leg opening of my baby panties and felt the wetness. She said, "That's a good baby," picked me up, and carried me over to the changing table and gave me a complete changing while talking softly in baby talk. I was returned to my crib and tucked in. Being so tired from the day's events, I fell asleep. The next morning I awoke having forgotten where I was for a moment. All I saw were bars around me, and then it quickly came back to me. I was also soaking wet. A while later my mother and aunt appeared in the door and saw that I was awake. My mother said, "Good morning, baby Susie," and came over to check my baby panties. She announced that I was soaking wet, and carried me to the changing table. This time, however, after my diapers were removed, I wasn't put in new ones right away. Instead, I was led to the other side of the room where there was a potty chair. My mother sat me naked on the seat and fastened its belt buckle around my waist to hold me in place. I said I didn't want to sit there but was told that I would remain there until I did 1 and 2. I pleaded for them to let me off, but they just walked out leaving the door open behind them. I asked them to shut it but my aunt said it had to stay open so that they knew I was okay. A few minutes later Cindy appeared in the doorway and stared at me. She started laughing and called her sister Jennifer to come and see baby Susie sitting on the potty chair. Both girls howled with laughter, but stopped when I began to cry. My aunt came and shooed them away. My aunt praised me for doing 1 and 2, and then called my mother. Next, I was given a bath. Then women took me back to my room, diapered me, and picked out the day's clothes. I was put in lacy yellow dress with petticoat, matching baby panties with lots of ruffles, lacy socks and Mary Jane shoes. Yellow ribbon was put in my hair. I took note of how the dress was as short as the one I wore the day before and complained that everyone could see underneath and tell I'm wearing diapers. My mother said I needn't be concerned over that as it was the style for baby girls and was cute. She then remarked how nice the outfit looked and how pretty and fresh I smelled, just like an infant. As my mother was leaving later that day it was decided that we would all go out for breakfast. I certainly didn't want to leave the house, and I wasn't moving quickly enough so my mother asked Jennifer to carry me out and make me sit on her lap in the car, which she was very happy to do. I was forced to go with them to a restaurant in town. While sitting in the back of the car on Jennifer's lap, she and Cindy kept pulling up my short dress above my waist and laughing, as it further exposed my bulging baby panties and diapers underneath. I protested but my mother and aunt thought it was funny, and laughed too. We arrived at the restaurant and Jennifer carried me in. The waitress led us to a big table by the window. Jennifer put me down and everyone took a seat. I was waddling around looking for an empty seat when the waitress called to me from behind. I turned around and saw she had brought over a high chair. She smiled and using baby talk said that she had a special chair just for me. My mother looked on cheerfully as the waitress picked me up and sat me in the high chair while complimenting me on how pretty I was. She then went off and returned with a baby bib and fastened it around my neck, saying that's a good girl. I was so humiliated. The waitress then brought juice for everyone and without paying attention set a glass on the tray of my high chair. Somehow, I accidentally knocked it over, spilling it onto the floor, and my mother scolded me. The waitress apologized for leaving it there, saying she wasn't thinking. She added that there might be a bottle in the kitchen. My mother said, "Oh, that's okay, I came prepared," and opened the baby bag she had taken with her. She took out the bottle from my aunt's house and gave it to the waitress, who went and filled it with juice. She brought it to me with a big smile on her face. When I didn't take it from her right away, the waitress stuck it up to my lips and told me to be a good girl. My mother said, "Go ahead, Susie, you don't want me to redden your bottom, do you?" With that, I drank the juice, making the waitress and my mother happy. I was ordered a small portion from the children's menu, and my mother helped feed it to me. People kept looking in through the window and smiling as they walked by, and I thought that they were staring at me. I blushed, and everyone thought this was so cute. After we finished eating, I was let down from the high chair, and the waitress praised me for being such a good girl. We got back into the car, but instead of going home we went to the supermarket, as my mother wanted to buy a few supplies to leave with my aunt. Cindy and Jennifer roamed around the store, but I was made to sit in the baby's seat of the shopping cart so I wouldn't get lost. My mother and aunt pushed me around the store as they selected baby lotion, oil, and powder, and some extra diapers. My mother picked out a pacifier and told my aunt that it might help calm me. As we were leaving, a lady with a little girl commented on how pretty I was and asked how old I was. I felt so shy, I just kept my head down. My mother replied that I was in the terrible twos, and the lady smiled and said that she had just gone through that with her daughter and wished my mother good luck. After we got home, it was soon time for my mother to leave. I begged her not to leave me there, but she said she had to and that she would try to visit soon. I started crying, and she held me and told me to open my mouth. She put in the pacifier and told me to suck on it. She cradled me, and she and my aunt tried to console me in baby talk. It seemed that everyone was beginning to think that I really was a 2-year-old, and couldn't help treating me that way. My mother left, and the rest of the day went like the one before. The next morning, after potty training, bathing, and diapering me, my Aunt Jane dressed me in a soft white baby blouse with red polka dots and a wide but short red skirt and baby slip. She said that it was rather cool today and that I should wear tights. She had me hold my legs up, and she slid a pair of white tights up over my clean baby panties. The Mary Jane shoes followed. The girls were to return to school that day, and after breakfast Aunt Jane had them kiss her and baby Susie goodbye. I really did feel like a baby as they went to school, and I stayed behind with Aunt Jane. Aunt Jane said that she was very happy to have a new baby in the house to take care of. She then gave me some dolls to play with and told me from now on to try to start holding in my pee-pee as long as possible. She was worried that I might fall down the stairs or something, so she put me in the playpen whenever she was busy cleaning and couldn't watch me. She would come in and check my diapers periodically. This routine went on for some time, and I grew accustomed to it. Cindy's baby clothes were quite a collection, as I found out. There were numerous short dresses, skirts, petticoats, slips, bonnets, rumba panties, etc. One outfit consisted of a large blouse with matching bloomers to go over the baby panties, which I wore once, and it was the closest I ever got to wearing boys' clothes the whole time I was there. My aunt took great delight in making me look as pretty and feminine as possible. She even painted my little fingernails and put rouge on my cheeks. She forced me to play with dolls and play house and other girls' games with Cindy. One time I spilled ice cream on my dress, and I was made to sit in the corner with my pacifier in my mouth and not say anything for over an hour. But most of the time I was treated well. However, on the nights Aunt Jane went out, I had to have Jennifer change me, and she would let Cindy help her, and they would sometimes tease me. On Saturday, Aunt Jane went out, and Jennifer was put in charge of me. She and Cindy were in a very playful mood, and after changing me, they put me in a short newborn's gown. They added a bonnet on my head and put a pacifier in my mouth. Jennifer grabbed me and put me in a baby carriage, telling me that I had better behave or else I would be spanked. Then they rolled me outside for a stroll, introducing me along the way to friends and passers-by as their baby cousin, Susie. They had a lot of fun, but I felt so humiliated. Aunt Jane took me out a lot during the day, and she would sometimes push me around in a stroller. She told everyone I was her baby niece. After quite some time, my wedding became better and I was allowed to wear training panties during the daytime, but if I had an accident and wet them, I was immediately put back in diapers for punishment. After many months of training, my mother took me home. My aunt gave her my cousin's baby clothes, which she did use on me for a few setbacks that occurred.